Today I will be showing you how to make cinnamon buns using an enriched yeast dough. This recipe yields 16 buns. You will need 340 grams of all-purpose flours, 7 grams of salt, 20 grams of yeast, 50 grams of granulated sugar, 4 fluid ounces of buttermilk, 1 egg, 180 grams of unsalted butter, softened at room temperature, and a 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract. You will also need a large mixing bowl, some pan spray, a wooden spoon, and a rubber spatula. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my flour and I'm going to add my salt to it. I want to stir the salt right into the flour so it's evenly dispersed throughout, so that there's no little pockets of salt in the flour, so that when I add my yeast mixture, I don't have any issues of direct contact with a large amount of salt. So right now I'm going to take my buttermilk. If you don't have buttermilk, you can take 1 cup of milk and add 1½ teaspoons of white vinegar to it and let it sit, and you will make a nice substitute for buttermilk. To the buttermilk, I'm going to add my sugar and I'm going to add my yeast. I'm going to stir it so that I can moisten all of the yeast, and then I'm going to let it sit on the side for about 5 minutes so it could activate and rehydrate. After about 5 minutes, I'm going to add the rest of my wet ingredients. I'm going to take my egg. I'm just going to crack it a little bit just to start it. And I'm also going to add my vanilla extract to this mixture, combining all of these ingredients well so that when I add them to the flour mixture, they are evenly dispersed. I just want to make sure that I really combine these ingredients well. So now I'm going to add my wet ingredients, making sure that I use my rubber spatula to get all of that liquid out of my mixing bowl, because it is all being accounted for in this recipe. So clean it really very well. Take a little bit of extra time to do this because it is an important step. And then I'm going to start to add the wet ingredients into my flour. Notice how I like to rotate the bowl so that I'm making sure that I'm evenly mixing things in, and it actually helps me not to make as much of a mess. So when I have mixed the flour and liquid mixture about 3/4 of the way, I'm going to add in my softened butter. Please make sure that the butter is not melted, as it would make a big mess. It needs to be room temperature softened. Sometimes I even like to leave it out overnight if I know I'm going to use it the next day, so it is easy to use and work with. Now at this point it's going to get a little bit messy. So I've decided that I'm going to go out into the counter, okay, because I want to make sure that I'm not warming the butter up too much. And if I'm constricted to the bowl, what's going to happen is that I'm not going to be able to work with it as well as I want to. So if you notice, in order for me to put it together, I'm kind of scrunching or crunching the dough together so that I'm flattening out the butter and incorporating it with the flour. Now this dough is a little bit sticky, so you're going to need a small bowl of dusting flour on the side so that you're able to make sure that it doesn't stick through the whole process of kneading. So I like to use a small bench scraper or a bowl scraper to clean the counter as I go, and then slowly incorporate flour onto the table or the board, whatever you're using, because you don't want to over add flour, because then it will affect your recipe, because it will become dry. Because we're looking for a very soft and tender pastry, more flour will dry out the recipe. So I'm going to continue to knead this. Remember, when you're kneading, you're basically just pulling the dough towards you, pushing it out, and folding it in half. Okay, so it's still just a little bit sticky. So I'm going to get a little bit more flour. on the counter so that I continue my kneading. When you notice that it's really not sticking too much to your hands or to the counter anymore, you can stop adding too much additional flour and just kind of use what you already have around. Okay, I'm going to probably knead this for about 10 minutes. Okay, you want to make sure that you're building gluten, but because of the amount of sugar and butter that is in this recipe, it's never going to have the same spring back when you test it that a lean dough like for our French baguettes has. You can test it while you're kneading. So if you look, I press my finger into the dough and it doesn't spring back at all. So I'm really not even close to ready for my dough to be set for fermentation. I'm going to keep kneading. So I'm going to say that this process is about 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, so you just need a little bit of time and a little bit of patience. If you were to use a stand mixer, the time would be cut significantly, probably about 6 minutes. But you can do this by hand very easily. It just takes a little bit of patience. So at this point, I've been kneading for about 10 minutes. And so I'm going to check one more time to see the progress. So I like to put it in a bowl. Make sure the sides are pulled tight and then press it in. And you notice how when I press in with the same force as before, it doesn't make a big of a divot and it kind of springs back. So I'm ready to go. So it's been about 10 minutes. I'm going to put it in a bowl. I like to spray it with a little bit of pan spray. Make sure you get a little bit on the top so it doesn't dry out. And then I'm going to cover it and I'm going to put it in a warm place for about an hour and a half and let it ferment until it doubles in size, so it can ferment. While it's fermenting, I'm actually going to make my filling. For my filling, I need 90 grams of softened butter, 7 grams of cinnamon, and 90 grams of brown sugar. I like to keep my brown sugar covered until I'm ready to use it because I want to make sure that it doesn't get hard or dried out during the process. So the first step I'm going to do is I'm going to take my butter and I'm going to break it down a little bit. Some recipes say that you can use melted butter, and I probably will put this in the microwave for just 5-10 seconds after everything is combined, but I will go over that later. So I'm going to continue to combine all of these ingredients together. I'm looking for them to come together like a paste, so it's going to take a little bit of work to get these ingredients together. I actually switched to a metal spoon because it's small for the bowl that I'm working in, and it's stiff, so I'm able to press down on the butter and the sugar a little bit more easily. So notice that when I'm combining the two, I kind of am rubbing along the bottom of the bowl to get these ingredients combined together. When I feel like I've combined most of the brown sugar and butter together, there's not a lot of white streaks inside of the brown sugar, I'm going to add my cinnamon. I don't like to add them all together because I just want to make sure that I'm not making much of a mess. So I'm going to combine this until it is all incorporated together, and you will have a very thick paste at the end of this mixing period. If for some reason you don't like as much cinnamon as we have added here in this recipe, you can actually lessen it. That is okay. If you want to add more filling to your cinnamon buns because you like them very gooey, you can add more to the recipe. So instead of doing one full recipe, you can do 1.5 times the recipe. Make sure you periodically go in and clean off your spoon so that you can make sure that any extra butter bits are not left behind. So I'm at the point I'm looking for. I'm going to leave this on the side out at room temperature until I'm ready to use it. So my dough has doubled in size and I am ready to roll it out. So I'm going to roll it out to about an 18 by 20 rectangle, okay? Once you start rolling it out, you cannot start over again, okay? Because you would have to let the glutens relax again inside the dough. if you roll it up back in a ball. So we're going to start once we're ready, and we're just continually going to roll it out until we get it to our desired size. Now, don't worry if right away it doesn't look like a rectangle. We're going to get there slowly. I am using a French rolling pin, but you can use a regular rolling pin as well. This is just my preference because I like that I'm able to angle it in different ways so that I'm able to push the dough out more easily. Notice that when I'm rolling out, I'm always starting in the center and going towards the sides. This is going to ensure that it is as even as possible. I like to work in little sections because if you keep rolling the dough and pushing it out, what's going to happen is you're going to warm it up too much and you won't be able to work with it. So I'm just about in a 18 by 20 sheet. Just going to try to make it as even as possible because when we're going to roll this, it's going to be easier for you. Now I'm going to take my filling and get ready to spread it out onto my dough. If you don't feel like it's pliable enough, you can put it in the microwave for like 5 to 7 seconds just to make it easier to spread. But for me, I found it was a good consistency. It's also going to depend on the temperature in your house. So what I'm going to do is I like to take part of the filling and start spreading it out because I don't want to put it all, because if I feel like it's too much, then it's going to be hard for me to take it back. So at this point, I've decided to take the rest of the filling out and I'm going to spread it all the way to every edge and every corner of this dough. You'll notice that it doesn't take a long time for me to do this. I'm just spreading it out. This is not like a work of art. I'm just making sure there's cinnamon sugar in every single part, all the way through. If you feel that one spot has more cinnamon sugar than the other, you could just go take your offset spatula. You can use a butter knife if you want also, and put a little pressure on it, and it should help move the cinnamon sugar around. So now I'm ready to roll my dough, and I like to start at the top. Sorry that it's not great in the picture. And I do my first fold, okay? So I do this fold and then I press it down. And then after I've done my first fold, I'm going to slowly roll it towards me. So I do small sections at a time. But if you notice how I'm just using my hands to pull it towards me, okay, gently, right, and put a little bit of pressure in the center when you're pulling so that you can make sure that the dough is nice and even. So once I have rolled it all the way, I'm just going to make sure that it's even in size, and I just like to flatten out the edges because we don't want to have any cut-offs. We want to be able to cut through this dough and not have any waste. So you're going to take a nice sharp knife. Sometimes some people use floss to get through this. I didn't have any, so I was unable to do this. And I'm going to cut these in sections. I like to pre-measure because I want to make sure that I'm going to get 8 cuts. So they're about 1.5 inches thick. All right, so I'm cutting 2 at a time. If you feel like you can only cut 1 at a time, that is fine as well. Just going to slice them all the way through. Once you cut them, you're going to put them into a prepared pan. I like put a little pan spray on my 2 pie dishes. If you want to use a sheet pan or a cookie sheet, you can at this point. But I want them to look nice for presentation, so I'm going to put them in a pie dish. When I put them in the pie dish, what I like to do is put the nice cut side up. But when I am getting ready to put them in the dish, what you should do is you take the open end and you tuck it underneath. And that way when it bakes, it doesn't open up. They have less place to go. Now, if you also notice, I am spreading them apart. This pan is going to hold about 8 cinnamon buns. And you'll notice that I'm leaving about an inch in between each one. So I put 7 around the edges and 1 in the center. And they are going to proof one last time until they're about double in size. And so they need room to expand during proofing and then also during baking. I'm going to cover them with a towel or with plastic wrap and let them proof for about an hour. So now they're done proofing. You can see how they have grown. They are ready to go into a 350-degree oven for about 18 minutes until they are golden brown. I'm going to start them on the top shelf. If I feel like they're getting too dark, I will move them to the bottom shelf to continue cooking. So here they are finished. You can see how much they have expanded and baked into each other. That is the perfect way for them to bake. They're nice and golden brown. They're soft to the touch, but they have a slight crunch when you touch them. So now we're going to ice them. They are completely cooled. And so now I'm going to make my icing. You need 1 cup of powdered sugar, 1 tablespoon plus 2.5 teaspoons of warm water, half a teaspoon of vanilla extract, and a teaspoon of shortening. The shortening really helps the spread and stick to the cinnamon buns. So I'm going to start with my powdered sugar inside of my mixing bowl. I'm going to take 2 and a teaspoon of shortening. The shortening really helps the spread and stick to the cinnamon buns. So I'm going to start with my powdered sugar inside of my mixing bowl. And I'm going to add my water slowly to this recipe. So I'm first going to start with 1 tablespoon, and then I'm going to add my 2.5 teaspoons of warm water. I'm also going to add my half a teaspoon of vanilla and my 1 teaspoon of shortening. You don't want to over add water to this recipe because it will become too liquidy and it will actually drip right off of the cinnamon buns. You're looking for the right consistency. So if you feel like the consistency is too thick, you're going to add literally drops of water to the mixture until you get it to the right consistency. When you feel it's at the right consistency, when you stir it and you pull the whisk out of the bowl, it should run like a ribbon. Okay, so here are 2 different ways that you can frost your cinnamon buns. Everybody's different. Some people like a lot of frosting and some people just like a little extra sweetness. So here I'm just using the whisk and going back and forth and putting like a ribbon effect on the top of the cinnamon buns. You can also spoon it onto your cinnamon buns and spread it out with a butter knife or an offset spatula or a palette knife. Whichever way you prefer, they are going to taste delicious. If you feel like that this recipe did not call for enough sugar glaze, you can absolutely double the recipe or 1.5 times it, but we feel that it was enough. We hope that you enjoy this recipe. Let us know if you try it. If you need help converting the recipe, please let us know and we can help you.